The Cleveland Cavaliers select Evan Mobley.
Has been a historical franchise in this league for years.
We have a trade to announce. The Boston Celtics select Jason Tatum.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Trevor Lane here. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA. Joined by Keith Smith. Follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. As I said, this is the original NBA Front Office Show. Keith, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I went and got a haircut today, and I'm feeling good, feeling fresh, and ready to go.
Let's kick things off with a little Myles Turner. Myles Turner, we talked about him yesterday. The Pacers had kind of set their asking price, looking for a couple of first-round picks, maybe a promising young player and a first-round pick. Now I wonder if they're going to get anything. Myles Turner on the shelf, dealing with a stress reaction in his foot, and he's going to be out through the trade deadline now. What does this do to the Pacers' prospects of moving him?
Yeah, I think what this changes if you are the acquiring team is you have to think about this more as a deal for next season and beyond than really for much for this, the rest of this season in the playoffs, because you don't know what you're going to get. Anytime it's a big man and it's a foot injury, the timetables never seem to go the way you think they're going to. It's a lot of times you see other guys, they're going to be out 6 to 8 weeks and they're back within 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. Sometimes these big guys, I mean, as we're kind of going through with Zion, I fully realize completely different situation as far as the way they're built. But a lot of times these big guys with these foot injuries, it turns into, 2 to 4 weeks, turns into 6 to 8, turns into 12, turns into the end of the season. So I think if I was another team, now I am kind of sitting here looking and saying, well, one of the dogs is roaming through the background here.
I see him.
You got to start to think about, all right, are we interested in next season and beyond with Turner? Are we looking at this being a long-term relationship? And if it is, that probably doesn't change much for you, because then you're really saying, all right, well, whatever we get this year is a bonus and go. If you were looking for it as more of a, hey, we'll have them for the rest of this year and then just next year, this probably causes you to maybe rethink and drop out. And you may have a few teams that are fully scared off entirely, saying, I just don't even want to deal with it. I'm out altogether.
Yeah, I mean, think about some of the teams that have been connected to him. You've got, the Mavs, the Lakers. These are teams that are trying to win right now. Portland has been a potential team. I mean, Portland, maybe that with Damian Lillard already dealing with injuries, maybe that doesn't scare them off as much if they're not worried about making the playoffs this year, particularly with their draft pick lottery protected. So maybe that's a landing spot. But some of these other clubs, like if you're the Mavs and you've been playing well already, like you're starting to play better, that's got to dissuade you, or at least make you less likely to want to give up guys that are helping you win games right now for Myles Turner, given this new injury risk.
Did you see Mark Stein's report?
I did.
I'm curious. Yeah.
That's why I mentioned it.
Okay. I thought you might've been leading there. I just wasn't sure. But yeah, it sounds like they're out entirely on Myles Turner. Now, it sounds like they had been out prior to this news, because they viewed Turner as a defensive upgrade for them, which he would have been for most teams, but they're already playing really good defense. And I think they're looking at it as, hey, we have limited assets to make kind of an impactful move. If we're going to do something, we got to do it in a different way. And it's just not spending it on Myles Turner. And from the Pacers side, I think this probably forces them into being maybe a little bit more realistic in their ask. It's probably going to be, they can't drive as hard a bargain now. You still can to some extent, because you're still one of only a few sellers on the market, especially for bigs. But it's kind of like selling something that's broken, and not a lot of people are going to want to buy it anyway. So you're just going to kind of, really look at it as, all right, are they still open to this and fixing it and having it long term, or what? And that's kind of where you have to approach things with Myles Turner is, can we get him right? Can we have him long term and go from there? So my guess is maybe something still happens, but what may happen now is this could delay things and really push this off to the off season. Because if the other thing I'll say for the Pacers side is, if you don't get a deal you like, you still have him under contract for next year. So you hang on to him going to the offseason, get him healthy, and then you look to move him then versus taking a deal you don't really like, because it's not like you're going to get worse by trading him away, so
Right.
maybe that changes their thought process a little bit there too.
I think given the circumstances, Myles Turner being healthy right now would be and trading him now would be preferable to waiting until the offseason, because right now there's not many sellers. Who knows what the offseason will look like? I think the chance of a high return if he was healthy is higher right now than it would be in the summer. However, now that this injury has popped up, I think you're right. I think that the wise move here, depending on what offers are still out there, may be just to wait until the summer. And, it's unfortunate timing here for Myles Turner, who's been talking about trying to get a bigger role. Unfortunate timing for the Pacers. But that doesn't mean that you should rush into a bad deal just because, hey, we had planned to move him at the trade deadline, so let's still move him. No, if that offer's not there, just wait. You've got time. Wait until the offseason.
Yep. Yeah, if you're a team like the Charlotte Hornets, where I imagine they were looking at it as, hey, he aids us in a playoff push this year. We also feel like he can be our long-term answer at the 5 around this youngish group we've put together of players, and you feel really good about that, then you still move. You move now and get it done, and anything you get is a bonus, and then you've got to move them forward. But it does change things a little from that standpoint for sure. It's and you're absolutely spot on. Just horrible timing all around for everybody, but that's just how it goes sometimes.
Speaking of big men dealing with foot injuries, Bull found out exactly what it was that nixed that trade that he was a part of, would have sent him to the Detroit Pistons. He now has surgery on his foot and is out for 2 to 3 months, and that was enough to scare the Pistons away and prevent them from doing the deal.
Yeah, and you can't blame the Pistons, right? Because if you're the Pistons, the whole goal was get a look at him before free agency this offseason when he's eligible to be a restricted free agent. You want to really get that look at him, see what he looks like in with your young group, and go from there. If you really looked at it and said, this dude needs surgery and we're not going to get that look, then there's no point. That's just a waste. So you just, say, forget it. And he's not proven enough where you're going to say, well, we'll do it anyway, and then we'll just re-sign him and go from there. You really had to see him and how he fits with Cade Cunningham and Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart and all the rest of their kids there in Detroit, Sadiq Bey as well. So it's just, now it makes sense. And from the Nuggets side, he'll have this surgery. He won't get retraded now, I imagine. I'd be very shocked, unless it was a straight salary dump, where they're sending him out just to kind of either finish the math and matching salary in a bigger trade or something. But Michael Malone said today he doesn't expect big changes to come to the roster. I think the Nuggets are really sitting there saying, our trade deadline, and I'm going to do air quotes around this, acquisitions are going to be Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., where we're not in a position where we need to go out and make a whole bunch of trades. We just need to continue to tread water, stay, strong, and then make, go get those guys back when we can. And then that's going to be what gives us the boost we need later in the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the way they have to approach things. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't explore things. They still need to be out there seeing what's available and things of that nature. But I think it's a good realistic point of view in terms of the Nuggets going into the trade deadline, not anticipating making any big major move, just instead waiting for guys to get healthy. Bull, it's really the opposite of, say, like Colin Sexton, right? Where Colin Sexton, a team may, if he's on the trade block, a team may trade for him because you're going to feel more comfortable in what you're getting. You can say, well, we can go in, we can re-sign him this summer. Maybe this is somebody that we want to give up something for in order to have that right to re-sign him. Bull's not at that same level where you know what you're getting. He's more, especially in the case of the Detroit Pistons, you want to get him in and get a look at him before you're going to commit to him long term. So just different situation, and unfortunately means that trade is now a no-go.
Yep. Yeah, and it completely makes sense now. The mystery is removed from what happened in that situation. And it makes sense, again, from the Pistons side, why you would say nah, we're good. Let's move on.
Keith, let's jump to something that you and we talked to some people today on Twitter about.
I talked to some. I'm sure you deal with them a lot more than I do.
Well, that is true. But Lakers head coach Frank Vogel, according to The Athletic, Bill Oram, apparently his job is very much in jeopardy. In fact, had the Lakers lost last night to the Utah Jazz, sounds like that was going to be the end of the road for Frank Vogel. Apparently, according to Orem, the front office let him know early in the season, and the coaching staff know that they were on thin ice, that if things did not go according to plan, that they could probably be on the way out, and that even with all of the injuries that they have dealt with this season, tons of them, Anthony Davis right now, who we'll talk about in a bit, has been out for a while now. LeBron James has missed plenty of games. You've had a number of players who've been out of action. Trevor Ariza, Taylor Horton-Tucker undergoing surgery right at the start of the season. Kendrick Nunn hasn't played all year. All of these things, plus health and safety protocols, the front office still believes that what we've seen has been far worse than just guys being injured. And therefore, this is simply not good enough. Where do you stand on this whole situation with Frank Vogel and the Lakers? I've talked about it a ton, but I'd like to get an outside perspective.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things you have to factor in here when you look at this situation. Is one, he has not been perfect. That is completely fair. He's never really been a very good offensive coach. He's always been a far better defensive coach. He has really kind of made his bones with those early Pacers teams that really gave the LeBron Heat like everything that they could handle when it looked like that those Heat teams were going to roll through everybody. They were right there. And then even in his brief time in Orlando, they still defended relatively well, considering they were a very bad team. And then that Lakers team that won the title a couple of years ago, they won it because of their defense. Their offense was fine, but their defense was dominant. They were a great defensive team all season long. And I've seen some people say, well, that was a creation of the bubble. It wasn't. They were really good all year long defensively. And they really, did a nice job. This year, the defense has fallen off. They are, well, let me make sure I have this right. They're down to 17th in defensive rating per Basketball Reference. They're 24th in offense. So the offense, I guess you kind of look at the pieces and say maybe it should be a little bit better. Mm-hmm. But when you factor in that Vogel's teams are usually not very good offensively, you kind of see it. I think the defense falling to the bottom half of the league is the bigger, far bigger issue. That's a problem. But so now let's go beyond that, though. Can he build a good defense with this group? I mean, there's just not a lot of good defenders in the group. Yeah. Russell Westbrook is a indifferent defender at best at this point in his career. Some people have said he gets steals. Well, steals aren't always a great measure of defense. Sometimes they're actually a very poor measure of defense because it means you're chasing and doing other things. Anthony Davis, even at this point in his career, as he's starting to approach 30, can still be a destructive defensive player because he can blow up all sorts of stuff. He just hasn't been healthy. He's now missed, I want to say he's missed like 17 games. And in the ones he did play, he clearly wasn't right in a lot of them. So that's a major issue, I think, that has caused them. They're big men, Dwight Howard, DeAndre Jordan. Dwight Howard has lost a step. DeAndre Jordan has lost all of the steps.
All the steps.
He doesn't
all
have
the
any
steps.
left. Avery Bradley's still super competitive on that end, but just doesn't, he's not what he once was as an all-ball defender. And then that is kind of it after, that. I guess Trevor Ariza, but he's still just kind of finding his way back, I think. And Stanley Johnson, but you're talking a 10-day guy and a guy who just started to play.
Austin Reeves.
All the rest of the guys they can have the occasional good defensive game, but they're not good defenders. I think it's a little unfair to put it all on Frank Vogel when you kind of look at all the pieces here. I get it, though. It's the Lakers. It's LeBron James. It's Anthony Davis. And they made that significant investment in Russell Westbrook, making that trade. And that's kind of the expectation was go win a championship. And they're fallen well short of that thus far. And, I said this on Twitter, which kind of, I think, sparked the whole, at least my morning, was can't fire all the players, so you fire the coach. So that makes sense to me. I mean, that Denver game was embarrassing.
It was.
I mean, that was one where I think if he could have gone into, called the South Bay team and said, hey, you guys want to finish this one out in the fourth quarter? They would have all come up and finished and played a heck of a lot harder than the rest of the guys did. The last thing I'll say on this too, because I've seen some people saying, well, if LeBron's supposed to be as great as he, says he is and all this and that, LeBron James has been awesome this season.
Yeah.
Like I don't like this has been, I mean, he like I mean, I'm sure you're aware, but for people who don't know, this is what he's doing this year. 28.8 points per game on 51, 36, 75 shooting splits. Really good percentage, especially the 36% from three, pretty good, especially considering he's at 7.9 3-point attempts per game, which is, if not his career high, that's got to be really close to it. 7.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.2 blocks. Does he bring it every single night as a lockdown defender? No, he doesn't anymore. He just can't. He has to carry too big of an offensive load. He's also, now he's old. Like, it's the reality is asking him to do that is too much, but he's also playing 36.7 minutes per game, and he's played in 32 of the 44 games. Like, he is out there most nights when he's, healthy, doing his thing. And I think he probably kind of owns now the, which he started in his Cleveland days, the take a 2-week vacation late in the year. That probably can't happen if they want to, be competitive to push for a playoff spot. So I just don't want to see the on-court blame put on LeBron. Off-court, yeah, he's probably owed a chunk of it. I mean, he has a lot of say in where they go and what they do with the roster. So, let's see. But yeah, I think that there are definitely, roster issues for sure. We got a puppy chiming in. He doesn't like it.
He doesn't like it. He says, "Oh, don't get mad at LeBron." No, so when I look at this, first of all, you're right on LeBron. He's been phenomenal. I've been saying that if the Lakers, let's say, in some alternate universe, I don't know, Earth 818 or whatever we want to call it, and I should say Earth 360, right?
Yeah, there you go.
LeBron James is getting MVP consideration if the Lakers are, say, top 3 in the West, right? I mean, that's how good he's. I'm not saying he's winning it, but I'm saying that he would be in the discussion if the Lakers were playing better, right?
Yeah.
That's how good he's been. You can't look at the Lakers record and say, oh, this is on LeBron, but you also can't look at it and say this is on Frank Vogel. In fact, I've been saying for a while now, if you point to any one particular thing, whether it's Russell Westbrook, the front office, Frank Vogel, the players in general, whatever it is, COVID, injuries, you point to any one thing as the reason why the Lakers have struggled this season, you're wrong. It's not a complete, or I should say, you're not totally correct. It's been a lot of things that has created the Lakers' problems this season. So if you look at this as, oh, that's all just get rid of Frank Vogel and problem solved. Everything's good. No. That's not the way this is going to work. However, like you said, Keith, they don't have a lot of other things they can do. They don't have a lot of trade assets. Essentially, the Lakers trade package is Taylor Horton-Tucker, Kendrick Nunn, and then some stuff you can put on maybe a couple second rounders. You've got a 2027 first. Essentially, let's say the Lakers call up the Pistons and say, hey, do you want THT and Kendrick Nunn? No? Oh, okay. Well, that's all we can do. It's not like there's other options they can turn to. So they're kind of stuck in that regard, and teams do this in general, even when you're not stuck in terms of trade assets. Teams do this. The one thing the first thing you're going to try to do is change the coach, because it's the easiest thing to do. You can bring in a new coach. Frank Vogel only got a 1-year contract extension. It's the let's try this and see if it sparks some kind of a reaction, right? It's your computer starts to act a little funny, so you unplug it and plug it back in and hope that fixes it. That's what firing the coach is in this case. It's not all on Frank Vogel. Now, like you said, though, he hasn't necessarily been great, right? He's had certainly some questionable decisions and things of that nature, but I can also empathize with him a little bit. I mean, it's like the lineup. Frank Vogel is a very good defensive coach. They gave him a team full of non-defenders and, I mean, publicly said, well, we've got a good defensive coach. He's going to figure it out. He's going to turn them into a good defensive team. And to his credit, they were like 11th in defensive rating when AD was healthy. But it's like going to a master carpenter, bringing him a bunch of kindling and say, here you go, build me a house. Yeah. You're not going to get what you were expecting. And again, this isn't all, it doesn't mean Frank Vogel is completely blameless, but to blame it all on Frank Vogel, I think is unfair.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'll say too, I mean, I've, beat up on him quite a bit too, but I don't think it's all Russell Westbrook either. It's funny. I see people saying all he does is shoot, long 2-pointers that are terrible. Well, you know what? Russell Westbrook's long 2-pointers this year, that's 13% of his total
Yeah.
attempts. It's still a lot, but it's not. I mean, he's still getting his shots from the rim or the paint. Add those two together, that's still 56% of his shots are coming inside the paint or around the paint
And it's
area.
more than previous seasons too.
Yep. The mid-range doesn't really take any from the mid-range. It's less than 1%, takes 13% on the longer twos. Then he takes 21% from three. Now, the problem is his finishing at the rim is not very good. His finishing in the paint is horrendous this year. He's at 36% on shots from floater range, 3 to 10 feet. That's really horrible. I don't even know how that can be a thing. And that's where it's actually all fallen apart for him, in addition to the turnovers. And of course, he's not a good three-point shooter and hasn't been for quite some time. The other thing I will say is I feel like we're in year 5 or 6 in a row of people writing the Russell Westbrook obituary in the first half of the season. And then we hit All-Star break and beyond. And all of a sudden this guy turns it on for the playoff push and all that. I'm not trying to be all rainbows and sunshine with the Lakers. It's certainly not me. That's not, if anybody was going to do that on the show, I don't know if people would expect it to be me. But the reality is I think you're spot on with this. There's no one magic bullet that is fix this and everything will be better. There is no one thing that's what's gone wrong with this team. It's accumulation of stuff that's caused a whole bunch of issues. And the hardest part is, as you referenced, there's no easy way to fix it. Yeah. And that's what makes this tough. I really think this is going to be you ride it out. You make whatever adjustments you can make. If that involves Vogel's got to go, and we think David Fizdale, I would almost be positive gets the next shot at it as kind of the lead guy.
And he was 1-5.
Yeah, when he took shows over Vogel. It's not like he came.
The grass isn't always greener.
Yeah, he made major changes and adjustments, but yeah, you get to there, and then that's kind of ride out the rest of this year. And then when Westbrook turns into an expiring contract, you'll find. I mean, he's been traded the last 3 years on the most untradeable contract in the league, right? Has been moved 3 years in a row. When it turns into an expiring contract, it becomes even more tradable. And they'll find a place for him, and then that's how you start to rebuild this roster around LeBron and AD. Because basically everything else, other than Talon Horton Tucker, and at this point I would assume Kendrick Nunn will opt in unless he really does return and plays like like a house on fire and is amazing. I would assume just about everything else you can kind of sweep away fairly easily and just reset. So news on Kendrick Nunn.
Yeah, let's get to
that. They tried to ramp him up and he, didn't react well to it. So it sounds like he's going to be out. They didn't give any kind of timeline or anything, just he'll be out longer than was expected. So that's not great because not that, I think the most rational fans are not saying Kendrick Nunn to the rescue, but I think everybody's looking at it and saying, "Hey, you can't be any worse. Let's get him out there." But that's now going to be a little while longer, at least a little while, if not quite a while.
So the Lakers this offseason, they had one bullet in the chamber, so to speak, in terms of non-veteran minimums that they could spend. They had the mini mid-level that they could use, or the taxpayer mid-level exception. They used that on Kendrick Nunn. We know they were interested in Patty Mills. Patty Mills went to the Nets. They turned to Kendrick Nunn. They were excited about getting him. They expected him to be not necessarily not the guy that's going to lead the team or anything, but be a contributor this season, to be somebody they could count on. And he hasn't played at all. They're within the organization. The hope was that January, this month, he would be back. Sometime this month, they would have him back. And now that it's officially been delayed, now they did not specifically say we don't expect him in January anymore or when they expect him. But just given where we are in the month and everything, I would say it's probably more likely than not that we don't see him this month. So unfortunate situation there, certainly, but there was some good news. And that came actually during the game. Anthony Davis was getting evaluated by the doctors and by the team doctors. They were checking him out, doing his reevaluation. And then after the game, we found out that he was indeed cleared to ramp things up, contact and everything in practice. And so this fits in with a timeline that we heard from Dave McMenamin on ESPN that the Lakers are expecting him back sometime during their Grammy road trip, which is coming up January 21st through 30th. So 6-game stretch right there. They're going to give him some time to get his legs under him, but now he's a full go in practice. And his return is going to be, sounds like, assuming all goes according to plan, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, my guess is probably more towards the back end of that road trip than the front end. Just the front end, I mean, it starts in a couple days. Yeah. So that's just a little tighter than I think they're thinking. But yeah, I think that would be my guess too, is, you know, we're week and a half ish out on AD at most at this point, probably about a week.
Yeah.
You know, would be where it is. I mean, and they need him. I mean, that's just, you know, it's what an oversimplification. You need one of the best
they
players
need one of their best players. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, but it is true. I mean, if for no other reason you need him so that LeBron is not all this wear and tear comes off him. Because the thing I noticed with LeBron, now the last couple games going against Jokic and Gobert, they went to Dwight Howard and he played a lot of minutes. But when they were playing him at the 5, now it becomes a real advantage on the offensive end. Defensively, though, he doesn't. There's no chance he wants to be on that because then he's involved up with screeners and everything else, and just kind of it just becomes a mess, you know, for him to navigate that stuff. I mean, there are very real reasons why Anthony Davis doesn't want to be a full-time 5. And it's because of the beating a full-time 5 takes, because you have to do so much. Even if it's just, I'm giving the guys the bump as they come through the paint, because I'm the last.
Just be the tag man or whatever.
Yeah, it's all sorts of stuff there that it's just, it really takes a toll on guys. So it's, I get it. So just get AD back, lessen that burden a little bit on LeBron, and, hopefully you can, maybe even bring his minutes down a little, because you don't want him playing 37 minutes a night. It's too many, especially, I mean, we're only halfway through the year. You're hoping for a run. So yeah, I'm very, very curious to see, where they go. I mean, we're not breaking any kind of news here. They're pitching that Horton Tucker Nunn combo to anybody who listen around the league. I mean, it is out there to every team is, but the problem is every team knows that's really all they've got to offer. Yeah. So they're kind of like, can you throw in a 1st-round pick? Can you do this? Can you do that? One of the ideas that was floated, I want to say it was maybe Nate Duncan or Danny LaRue, floated the idea of, do you do what they did with the Pelicans pick and say, hey, can we throw a deferral on there? With that one pick that's going to the Pelicans, where you can get in 2027 or 2028. Do you do that, or are they going to be in a position where, hey, we have to offer a swap on the 1 year that we don't trade? It's just it's tough. I mean, it's tough. And again, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face. They're not making a Russell Westbrook trade at the trade deadline. I will come back and I'll eat my hat, but I really don't want to eat a hat, but I don't know what I'll do. I'll do something. We can come up with some punishment. If they trade Russell Westbrook before the trade deadline, I'll, I don't know, I'll eat a ghost pepper or something like that. We'll figure all that out.
No, Keith, I've been, and by the way, I should mention this, Russell Westbrook's dunk last night on Gobert was one of the best of the season. Yeah. That was absolutely incredible.
It felt like he took half a season's worth of frustration out on one play on Gobert. I mean, that was great. And it was funny too. And you know what? I always say this. Good for Gobert for hanging in there and not making the business decision and ducking out cheaply. I mean, I love when we love when bigs challenge, because then you get those great dunks. Right. And that was, that's right up there for dunk of the year for sure. Just because it was on.
Yes.
More than anything.
And that's what made it. But it's part of what made the dunk, right? Is it was on. Yeah. It wasn't like, it's not like he dunked on Jalen Brunson or something like that. He dunked on Gobert. Yeah. So that was amazing. But you're absolutely right. With the caveat that every single time, I'm sure there's some examples where it didn't actually happen, but we've pegged a contract as untradeable.
Sure.
It's gotten traded eventually.
Yep.
Okay. That being said, though, I think if you're going in, and speaking to Lakers fans, if you're going into the trade deadline hoping for a Russell Westbrook trade, you are most likely, very likely, going to come away from the trade deadline disappointed, because logistically it's just so difficult for it to happen. Yep. Again, you never say never in the NBA, but I feel pretty confident that it's not going to happen.
Hey, I'll throw this one thing out there too. I asked a handful of people around the league, the Horton Tucker Nunn combo. We know that's out there, but if they were going to trade somebody else, and I took LeBron, AD, Russ off the table, who would they get the most for of the remaining players on the roster? I'll let you guess it, but who do you think it was that they said?
Austin Reeves. Oh no,
Malik
sorry,
Monk.
Malik Monk.
Yeah, it was
sorry,
Malik
I
Monk.
wasn't counting Malik Monk for that whatever reason.
But yeah, Malik Monk, he's played pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, he's and I think everybody is still kind of shocked that was the deal. He took it clear. I think for Malik Monk, the idea was I could have made a little bit more money somewhere else, but here I'll go. I'll be a big part of things, and the next summer I'll cash in as hey, I'm available here. So he was the next guy on that list that people threw out there. I looked. Do you know? I mean, I'm sure you do. Russ has played in every game.
Yep, the only guy to play in every game.
Do you know who's played the second most games on the team? Without looking,
second most games on the team, like actually appeared in or been available.
Yeah, appeared in.
Avery Bradley.
He's close. He's fourth. Carmelo. 41
that makes
games.
sense because Carmelo up until this recent stretch he hadn't missed any games, so he's missed the last I think 3.
I mean, that kind of gives you a real sense, right? Of just kind of what they've been going through. I mean, a lot of guys have missed a lot of games. Now, a lot of guys have missed a lot of games all around the league too. So I don't want to make that the whole out, but yeah. All right. Moving on.
We do need to get to the Nets, potentially trading Nick Claxton.
Yeah.
And it makes some sense from a salary cap perspective. They are way, way over the cap, way into the tax. I want to say tax alone. I'm not talking about their salaries. Tax alone, they're well over 100 million. They've got to be what, like 110-ish?
Let's see. They're at they are 35 million over, which puts them in they got to be up over 100 million total. Especially once you combine. That's in penalties plus salary. Yeah.
Like the salary cap is what, 113 this year?
Almost one. It's 112.4.
So right about there. Their luxury tax payment is more than a full team's like salary, right? Which is amazing.
Hold on, let's do some math because this will be fun. So they're $35.3 million over the tax line. So that's not the penalties. That's just the initial number they're over. If we just count guys on roster for the Oklahoma City Thunder right now, they're at 46.1 million. For guys on roster. Now their number's higher because they have Kemba's full dead money on their books and stuff. But just their rostered players right now, they're at 46.1 million. So they're about 11 million higher than the Nets. And then for reference, the Nets are not the highest in the league. That's the Warriors at 39.3 million. But still, it's a big number. But
in any event, though, they are considering trading Nick Claxton. Part of that might be salary cap related.
I think more for next year than this year. Because this year, he's only at 1.8 million. He's finishing out that contract. Right. He signed with them as a second-round pick. But then he's a restricted free agent this summer. And unless you're really committed to giving him something around mid-level money, I think some team might want to throw that number out there. You're probably somewhere 8 to 12 million starting salary. If you're the Nets, unless you're really interested in going there, you're probably looking at it and saying, no, we gotta, let's, again, not exactly like the Lakers because they have a couple other places they could go to create trade avenues. But he's probably the young player that's actually tradable on the roster that has the most value. My question would be, don't you kind of need him?
Yeah.
If you're hoping to go where you want to go this year. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge has not been great. Paul Millsap has been, I'm guessing he's just done. I mean, he's given them absolutely nothing. And that's kind of it for their big men until you get down into, first round pick Day'Ron Sharpe, he's okay, but you don't really want to go into a playoff series with Day'Ron Sharpe as one of your starting, players. You really, I think they kind of need Claxton. Personal opinion, I would, unless you're really blown away and you're getting back a big who can start for you at the 5. And I guess Blake can start at the 5 too if you want to go there, but he hasn't looked that great this year either. I would just keep Claxton and then deal with whatever comes this offseason because you could always make it a sign and trade and get something of value back that way.
If you're the Nets, what are you hoping to get for Nick Claxton?
right now, I would
Yeah,
need a big. Like I'd need
right.
another big back,
And so
right?
is there a
Like
big that's cheaper right now than him that's
not
going to be
cheaper.
better?
No. No, what they do have
But you
though,
could
you know what
package
they
some guys, I guess, with him.
yeah, now their thing is, I mean, once you're at we said $35 million over the tax line, who cares, right? Let's just keep going to some extent.
Just keep spending.
But they do have an $11.5 million trade exception from the Spencer Dinwiddie trade to the Wizards this summer. Or, I guess as everyone else calls it, the Westbrook trade. But then DeAndre Jordan, from when they dumped him to the Pistons, they've got a $6.3 million trade exception there. So you could you go get Robin Lopez and throw Claxton to the Magic and then say, hey, Orlando, now Orlando's got Wendell Carter. They've got somebody, so maybe it needs to be a third team. And what about what if you sent him off to the Thunder for
Derek
something
Favors.
minor and you brought Robin Lopez in?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Side.
Yeah,
Maybe sent the Thunder send Isaiah Roby or something to Orlando. I don't know. Maybe that's a way. I mean, Robin Lopez is going to kind of be the favorite target, I think, of a lot of teams that need a big, just because he's got a movable contract and he's
what's he getting this year again? I don't remember.
$5 million. $5 million even.
Okay,
So,
let's say you opt for a second rounder. So for whatever reason, let's say the Magic move him and they just absorb Robin Lopez into a trade exception. What's the actual cost of Robin Lopez when you add in the luxury tax? That $5 million player, it becomes what, 20?
25, 30 million. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's where it helps have one of the richest owners in the league, though, I guess. But,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has their limits, right? Everybody has their limits of, hey, let's chill here with this a minute, right? So, but yeah, I mean I'd have to get a big back that I can plug in and play, or a real good wing. And it's not that I'm placing the super high value on Claxton as a player. It's just more, what else do they really need? If you assume Kevin Durant's coming back, it really seems like another big. I mean, I guess another ball handler that can score. For the games when Kyrie can't play. We should touch on that now since we're on the Nets.
Yep, let's do it.
He was asked after their Martin Luther King Day game where he played. They lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers on the road. They asked when Kyrie met with the media, they said, Kevin Durant's out. Does that change your vaccination status? Go read the quotes because they were long and he said a lot of stuff, but ultimately he said, no, I am firm. His exact quote was, I'm rooted in my decision. So he is not going to get vaccinated. So unless New York changes their mandates, which doesn't sound like they will, anytime maybe until we get into the summertime, at best, he's not going to be playing in home games. And I want to say somebody said too, Washington and maybe one other place have also instituted for like indoor venues. And that means that he would not be able to play there either. Because they don't have it limited to the home performers. That'd be Washington, D.C., to be clear. And he's clearly, I don't know if they have any more games in Canada, but he's clearly not going to Canada unvaccinated. He can't. Now, that becomes a problem if you play either one of those teams.
Right. I'm looking at the standings right now.
Entire series.
The Nets right now are sitting in the 3 seed, and the Wizards are at 8, so that wouldn't put them on a collision course right now. But that could certainly change. And now here's the thing. Ironically, unless you're playing Washington or Toronto or whoever, if the Nets were to slide a bit in the standings, they're only a game up on the Cavs for the 4 seed. They're a game and a half up on the Bucks for the 5 seed. If they were to slide a bit and lose home court advantage, that could actually help them. Like let's say you go to a 7-game series, game 7 is then on the road, and guess what? You get Kyrie for that. Wouldn't that, I mean, it's such a weird situation.
That is some game theory that you got to really,
And I'm not saying you do it on purpose. I'm saying with KD out, that slide could naturally and could ironically wind up helping. I'm not saying they try to lose games to create that.
Well, the reality is, Philly is in 6, and they're only 2.5 games out of first.
Yeah,
they are only 2 games behind the Nets, who are a half game out of first. So that could just happen. Right. Yep. That could just be the way it goes anyway, because the Nets, as loaded as it seems like they might be, plus 2.4 scoring margin, not that great. It's not even anywhere close to top in the East. Cavs still are tops in the East at plus 5.1, Heat plus 4.4, and then it's the Bucks plus 3.7, then the Nets. So they're fourth in the East in scoring margin. They've not been a good home team, maybe in part because Kyrie can't play, but that's unfair because he hasn't been able to play on the road either until just recently. But they're only 12-11 at home anyway. So yeah, I mean, I could see them start to slide for sure in the standings. And then here comes your other challenge if you're the Nets. What do we say about James Harden? Fantastic until you have to put all the burden on him in the regular season, and then he's worn out by the second round of the playoffs. We could be heading there depending on how long KD is out. It's just, it's something to look at. Now, unlike the Lakers, and what I was trying to get to with these guys is they've got a whole bunch of different things they could do trade-wise. If they wanted to do stuff, they've got those trade exceptions. They could also, you could very easily see them saying, I think he's somebody they need in the long run, but you could see them saying, well, we could move Joe Harris because it's a big number at 17.4 million. That can go get us a player. And then we go that direction. So let's just keep an eye on them as we get to the trade deadline because they've got some more triggers that they can pull versus the Lakers.
Let's talk a little bit about Jerami Grant. Jake Fisher, Bleacher Report, had some stuff on him. He did actually have Jerami Grant included in a Ben Simmons trade offer from the Detroit Pistons that the 76ers declined. You had a few guys. Sadiq Bey was part of it. I don't remember what else. It was a future first, Sadiq Bey, Jerami Grant.
Sadiq Bey,
yeah,
Cade Cunningham, the rights to say Isaiah Thomas played for the Sixers, I'm sure, like just the way this is going. Yeah, I'm sure it's all everything under the sun.
Right. But but in any event, the 76ers, of course, said no, that's not enough. But Jerami Grant is seen as kind of the crown jewel, if you will, of this year's trade deadline, especially now with Myles Turner dealing with an injury. I mean, Jerami Grant is injured as well, but he's expected back sooner rather than later. So with that being the case, with him being the main target of this draft class, and the Pistons are rumored to want a couple of firsts for him, what are your thoughts on that? What's the probability of Jerami Grant getting moved by the trade deadline now that Myles Turner probably isn't as strong of an asset?
Yeah, this is going to be one where you have to have a real good way to backdoor the negotiations, because you want to have a sense of, hey, after next year, meaning the 22-23 season, are you going to resign here? Can we get you to do an extension this offseason? What does that look like? By all accounts, Jerami Grant wants paid, and Jerami Grant also wants to be somewhere where he's not the third, fourth guy in the pecking order like he was in Denver. He wants to be a big featured player. That starts to take the destinations. You could really start to look around and say, all right, we'll take this team off the list because they can't do this. Take this team off the list. Take this team off the list. And then you're left with a much shorter list, because I don't know how many teams necessarily view Jerami Grant as, all right, you're our number 2 on a title team. I think a lot of teams, if you're our number 3, you're our number 4, anything below that, yeah, we're probably really, really good. So that's where I think the challenge comes in for Jerami Grant is, so you have to be really able to back channel that to say, all right, what are we thinking on this as far as the contract goes, next one, role, is he going to be happy here? Those kind of things. Because otherwise, this is one where you could make this trade, then he's not happy, and then you deal with another year of unhappy, and then he's gone. And that becomes a whole mess thing. And I don't mean this as any criticism of Jerami Grant. I think his idea is fine. I think it's a little misplaced. I don't think he's quite that level of player. I think, I don't know that he's quite that good. And we've seen he's been the man in Detroit, and his counting stats look really good, but his efficiency is really poor. Turnovers have gone way up. His shooting percentages are down. So I just don't know that he's that guy. But I mean, if I'm the Pistons, I'm asking for the moon, because it looks as it looks right now, we've got the best player available. So you better come ready to pay for him, and that's how they should treat it.
Fit wise, he's very easy to fit in on just about any team, because you can run, you can play big, you can play small, you can ask him to do a lot of different things, and he can accomplish those things for you. So
sure.
It makes sense. I do wonder how big of a deal that's going to be. Him wanting a large role compared to what teams want him to be for
Mm-hmm.
them. In some ways, you could compare this to Aaron Gordon last year in terms
Mm-hmm.
of what a team would be acquiring him for to be that
Oddly
kind of wing defender.
replaced Jeremy Grant.
Exactly, which is funny, but I could see a contender really making a push to try to get
Yeah.
him.
Oh yeah.
But I do want, like, if let's say, and I don't think the Lakers offer for him is going to beat out the other ones. But let's say, just because this is the team that's on mine for some
Sure.
reason, I don't know why, but let's say the Lakers trade for him, and you're Jeremy Grant, and you're coming to a team with LeBron, with AD, with Russell Westbrook. So you're 4 in the pecking order. Is he going to be happy with that? Is he going to want to re-sign? Is he going to send that message to the Lakers? Hey, I don't really want to be 4 in the pecking order. I want to be somewhere where I'm at worst 3 or 2 or something like that. And so I probably don't want to do an extension. And then does that derail things? That's something
Yeah.
that we have to look at too when we look at which contenders might be interested in him. Does he want to be there? Because, well, he's not a free agent in a few months. He's got another year, but he still will have a little bit of influence on his landing spot by communicating whether or not he will do an extension.
Yeah, and he's going to be 28 in a couple months, so that's something you have to factor in as well too. I mean, that's not certainly he should have, he should be fine through the duration of his next contract, I would imagine. But yeah, and then I think that's where the difference comes in, right? Because if it's the Lakers, I think that's a much easier pill to swallow behind, one of, if not the best player of all time,
Sure.
Anthony Davis, who's really good, and Russell Westbrook. Plus, if you're Jeremy Grant, you might be looking at it and saying, well, I could do that for the rest of this year because they're going to make changes.
Yeah.
And then in a few years, by the time any kind of extension would be really starting up, who knows if LeBron's even still there? It might be AD and me, and then I'm really feel like I'm in a great place. So that I think this is one where if you're Jeremy Grant and his agent in those teams, you're really having some conversations around there. What are we looking at over the next few years versus just right now? I also do think that there is some value to if you're a team saying, we don't really care about what happens in the next few years. We think we can get you in. You'll play really hard and really lift us and, help us be a really good team. Let's go get this done. And, we'll worry about all the rest of it later.
That's possible.
There are a handful of teams when, if you're close, go for it and let the rest sort itself out down the line. When you try and live too much in two worlds, you get really stuck. That's part of what the Celtics are living through right now. They never would cash in because it was, well, look, we can do this. We can blow open this title window for 10 years running. And I mean, that's clearly not what's going on, right? I mean, we're, there's far away from title contention as they've been since this whole rebuild started post Pierce and KG. So it's, well, a little bit better than year one of that, but it's, but they're still pretty far away. So it's been, I think there is something to say, just, hey, make it happen. We'll figure out the rest later if you're that close.
I think Utah is an interesting landing spot.
Mm-hmm. Chicago
as well. Oh yeah. Oh man, Chicago would be a good one as well.
Yep.
Memphis. There's another one that could be interesting.
Memphis, maybe.
There's a few. There's a few.
Yeah,
that are out
for
there.
sure. I would have said Atlanta. Now I don't know.
They're sliding,
and they got a big win yesterday over the Bucks. But yeah, I mean,
we'll see how the next few weeks go for Atlanta.
I kind of wonder for him if it could make sense. But this is probably one you'd have to get a third team involved to route the value the right way. And it's not as much a play for this year as later. But the Clippers, if you really wanted to, if you were the Clippers and you were saying, all right, we're going to kind of, whatever comes the rest of this year comes, but we'll reset. And then the other one, if it's just really that important to them to make the postseason, Washington. Good.
That's a good landing spot. I like that. Yeah, because you can take, I mean, Trez has a $10 million expiring. You take that, you add in some stuff to it.
I also like Minnesota too.
Like Minnesota's another.
If Minnesota was, hey, well,
this is kind of what we started with too. Like every team could use
and that's
Jeremy
it. And
Grant.
this is why this list of, I want to say Jake had like 7, 8, 9 teams on the list that he put out there. So I mean, that's that's kind of why he's got a pretty tradable contract, pretty good player, and a lot of people would like to have him.
Yeah, absolutely. Keith, we have one last thing. So, little behind the curtain here. We started today saying This is just going to be a one-show day. We don't have enough to do 2 different shows on this topic. And lo and behold, here we are. We have recorded just as long as we would have if we had done 2 shows in the day, just in this one supersized show. So you're welcome. I should have known when Lakers were on the schedule here to talk about that I was going to wind up going overtime on that. But to finish
that was mostly me though.
You got going on Lakers too, but I think I kind of poked and prodded there as well and got us a deeper discussion on Lakers than I think we had initially intended to. But in any event, Daniel House signed a 10-day contract with the Jazz, and this is a real 10-day.
Yep, not the standard 10-day.
Yeah, not the hardship one.
Yep, the Jazz are, I believe, are out of the hardship, woods here, and they are back to standard 10 days. That's going to be where most teams are going to be at. Most of the hardships are gone. And then just because it came out really while we were setting up to record and while we've been recording, if we go across the hall in LA, Paul George, news is not good. It's going to be out at least a few more weeks. With the elbow injury, that's a lot of reporting on that coming out. Young Music and Woj are reporting they're extending Paul George's initial 3 to 4 weeks of rest by a few more weeks to see how the torn UCL in his right elbow responds. So that's a big deal.
They're hoping that the extra rest will allow them to avoid surgery.
Yep.
And
gotta be.
And that's what their hope is. But it all depends on how it responds. If it doesn't respond well, then you're talking surgery. So that's, I mean, on one hand, I guess it's a good sign, because if it wasn't responding at all, they would just say, that's it, surgery.
Yep.
Right? So extending it a few more weeks suggests that at least it's responding to some degree, unless this is just kind of a last gasp, like, you know what, let's give it a couple more weeks and see if anything changes, because it hasn't. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong. I don't know. I don't know which way to take this. I'm contradicting myself as I'm thinking about what this really means for the Clippers, because I know the other side of this. If this does not work, it's surgery and the season is over.
Yep. Yeah. My guess is, give it a couple weeks. Let's see where we're at as a team in a few more weeks too. Let's see. And if we decide, you know what, he can't play, and when we go, let's bail out I think I hesitate to call it a problem, but I don't know that they're even going to fall out of the play-in. Yeah. Even without George and Kawhi, unless they really do a full-scale sell-off and are openly tanking games.
They don't.
They're still four.
They don't have their.
They're still 4.5 games up. That's exactly it. They have no reason to completely bottom this out unless you really can get great assets back. Then you say, hey, sunk cost, we get all these awesome, picks and players and all this stuff to rebuild around Paul George and Kawhi. But my guess is you kind of say, all right, this is a lost season. We write it off. Maybe we see Kawhi do kind of what oddly enough, Paul George did a few years ago with the Pacers after he broke his leg, where he came back, remember, with about 6 to 10 games to play. Yeah. He played in a few games more, just, hey, let's get that confidence built up, feeling good going into the offseason. Maybe that's what they do with Kawhi. I don't know that he needs that or not, because that wasn't that same kind of injury. But yeah, let's keep an eye on the Clippers as we move things forward here for sure, because they've got all sorts of trade stuff they can do.
And the effect of this, this could help the Thunder. And I don't want to paint the picture of like the Thunder celebrating an injury to a place. I don't think that's the case. But the Thunder have the Clippers pick. Yeah. So if the farther the Clippers fall here, the better off for the Thunder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they would love to see them fall completely apart and fall out and into the lottery. Yeah, because it's complete that is no protections on that pick. So yeah, absolutely, they'd love to do that. One thing for certain we can say now is the Clippers are not going to be making any kind of all-in moves to really boost their chances this year. That's not going to happen.
Does this then take them out of Jerami Grant, or do you think they look at him as a piece for next year?
Yeah, I think that's still a kind of move you can do where that's this year and next year. Mm-hmm. Maybe helps you get into the playoffs versus just the play in. But then, we can really move him next year. So yeah, I think that makes sense.
All right. Well, accidental marathon show. Here we are, 54-minute mark. Was not our intention, but this is sometimes what happens when we sit down and we start talking NBA basketball.
indeed.
So to those of you who made it through the whole thing, congratulations. Thank you guys for sticking
thank
with
you.
us. And we'll be back tomorrow. Maybe we'll have two shows. We should have split this one into two, but maybe next time we'll have two shows during the course of the day. Maybe it'll just be one gigantor-sized episode like this one is. But thank you guys for sticking with us. Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well. And don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Till next time, everybody. Stay safe and see ya.